Hi, my name is Matthew. I'm 30 years old, and I'm here to audition for the role of Evan Hansen. Okay. Imagine a window. Well, oh, I look too young. Okay. Well then, I guess give it to Ben Platt. Why not? Okay, we're talking about the Dear Evan Hansen movie today. Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees. And welcome to the first ever Teacup at TIFF film review. This is super exciting because if you weren't aware, I'm a Canadian. And one of the many perks to being from the Great White North, especially being from the Toronto area, or, you know, Southern Ontario, same thing, is that we have one of the greatest film festivals in the world every year. Like, minus last year, but we're not talking about last year. And of course, I am talking about the Toronto International Film Festival, or TIFF. I've been going to TIFF for just over 10 years now, and it is such a cool festival, you know? It's a great festival to go to if you want to catch some, like, features from first-time feature filmmakers. If you're a Canadian, it's a fantastic place to go and catch some new Canadian work. If you have a hankering to watch just, like, a 12-minute short film in black and white of a camera panning 360 degrees, because, you know, that's art. Just ask Laura Mulvey. They have a interesting selection every year of short films. I mean, they've never programmed anything that I've submitted, but that's neither here nor there. And of course, there's what TIFF is best known for. Those big, flashy gala premieres, you know, the hottest movies of the next year's award season. So these big gala presentations at TIFF are a big deal. And of course, this year was no different. And I was pretty excited because the opening night film at TIFF for this year, for 2021, was none other than the adaptation of the Broadway hit musical, Dear Evan Hansen. And I've seen some musicals premiere at TIFF in the past, but like, to my knowledge, this is the first time that a musical has opened the festival. And as someone who loves film and as someone who loves musicals, I loved this. So of course, I had to be there. Well, like, to the best of my abilities. This was an interesting year for TIFF because they've started doing like a hybrid event, and I know that that's almost entirely because of the world situation. I'm curious to see if it's something that they're going to continue with. So they did have, I think, 3 to 4 like in-person screenings of Dear Evan Hansen in different venues in the city last night. Well, last night to me, recording this. But they also offered digital presentations. Like, they offered digital rentals for Dear Evan Hansen, just available to anyone in Canada. And I'm in Canada, so of course I was going to jump on that. And I am so thrilled for today to be able to bring you my, like, first impression review of the Dear Evan Hansen film. Now, just quick disclaimer, I'm going to do my best to make this a spoiler-free review for the film. Alright? Now, when I say that, I feel like it's pretty fair game to just acknowledge certain plot points that exist in the stage show, because I'm assuming that if you're watching this review, you probably know the stage show. Probably better than me, because, this is my confession, I had never seen the musical live on stage. And it's not like I didn't have the opportunity to. It did play in Toronto, I didn't see it. So this is my first time watching Dear Evan Hansen in any capacity whatsoever. And first, I thought it'd be cool to just give my thoughts on the story, on the plot, you know, the narrative. I was familiar with the music going into it, and I knew that I loved, like, the songs that everybody loves, like Waving Through a Window. That's a bop. But truth be told, I went into this movie with not exactly the highest of expectations. I mean, I knew about all the hype. I know a lot of people who do love this musical, but as much as I love musicals, I'm kind of a musical theater snob. And I haven't necessarily loved the trends that we've seen in contemporary musical theater over the last 10 to 15 years or so, and that's actually why I didn't rush to see Dear Evan Hansen on stage when it was playing nearby me. And on top of that, as much as I've heard all the praise for the musical, and as much as I do like the songs, I was also aware, as I'm sure all of us are, of the criticisms, the very valid criticisms that people have had about the show and Evan's character specifically. And so I I don't know, I went into this prepared to not like it. And just to give my quick review before I get into some more details, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, the movie itself, I thought was extremely well executed and very well made as a film. But what surprised me was that I appreciated the material more than I thought I would. Now, I do think that's in part because they made some very necessary changes to the narrative in like the third act of the film, which I'm not going to spoil for anyone who wants to watch the movie, but they are changes that I felt were absolutely necessary in terms of at least suggesting some form of accountability for Evan and his actions that, to my knowledge, don't exist in the stage production. And if I were to see this story play out without certain plot points that I believe were added for the film, I would really be in the camp of not liking this show or this musical or Evan as a character, because I'm always here for an anti-hero, 100%. But at the same time, if you're going to give us an anti-hero story, it has to be with some kind of purpose. They can't do terrible things and then just get away with them with all being forgiven and forgotten. And of course, the musical deals with some very important ideas and some very difficult subject matter to navigate in terms of writing a musical. So I applaud them for making the effort and for bringing these very important discussion topics to the forefront. But at the same time, I sort of left the film not clear on what message they were trying to communicate. I mean, the obvious message is hashtag you will be found. It's on the posters. One of the most beautiful songs in the musical is just outright telling us you will be found. And I think as a message and as a beacon of hope, that is beautiful. But it also kind of sat with me in an uncomfortable way, because it's really right at the point in the narrative when I feel like Evan is starting to cross the line and starting to exploit Connor's death for his own personal gain. So that just made me conflicted, and this is a beautiful message, but it feels wrong? And of course, it's going to be a different viewing experience for everyone. Like, full disclosure, I didn't cry. I was expecting to cry. Well, I was expecting to maybe cry, because I've heard a lot of people cry at Dear Evan Hansen. But even though it didn't make me cry, it made me think, and I'm still processing all of those big thoughts. But what really took me by surprise is how the movie made me feel. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that well, actually, this is a good moment to just transition into me talking about how I feel about this movie just as a movie. I think as a film, it is incredibly well crafted. You know, they really lean into the editing to create this sense of disease, not disease, but like dis-ease. Is that even a word? Discomfort. Let's go with that. So the editing, not just in the opening sequence, but throughout the film, does this brilliant job of making the audience feel the discomfort that Evan is feeling. And there were at least 2 or 3 scenes when I found that my heart was really palpitating. And it's not that anything extra exciting was happening on screen. I just found myself so invested in the story that I was starting to feel anxious for Evan, for the other characters, and there are no words aside from just saying that it affected me and I appreciated it. Okay, now aside from the editing, a few other things that were standouts and highlights to me about the movie. First off, Sincerely Me. That was probably, not even probably, Sincerely Me was my favorite sequence in the entire film. I had a 4-hour window to watch my digital rental presentation from the TIFF, and I spent 2 hours and 17 minutes watching the film start to finish, and the other hour and 43 minutes were just devoted to me watching Sincerely Me on repeat. If you want a sense of why I love movie musicals, Sincerely Me is it. It's a combination of the editing, just the energy of the music, the live performances on screen, and then just the cinematography, the camera work in that sequence. They do some incredible Steadicam things that were just mind-blowing, and it all came together so well. And it was all in service of a really catchy song, but a song that was equally thought-provoking. I think this is a very thought-provoking musical. I still don't know if I like it, but it's a very thought-provoking musical. Okay, and just building on that, one of the standout performances for me actually came from Colton, the guy who played Connor Murphy. Now, he didn't have that much to actually do in the film, but the bit of screen time that he did have was so memorable, because really, he's kind of playing 2 characters. He's playing the mysterious, pretty tragic, enigmatic Connor when he's alive, but then he's also playing, I don't know how to describe it, like the physical manifestation of Evan's lies. You know, so even though he doesn't have a ton to do, he's given a ton to do. And you just get to see the incredible range that this performer has, and I thought that was great. And it's kind of an ongoing thing with the cast in this movie. I thought the supporting cast was top-notch. But I think this is a good time to acknowledge the elephant in the room. You are adorable. Look at that trunk. Also, Ben Platt is too old to be playing Evan Hansen. But we all knew that. We all go into watching the Dear Evan Hansen movie knowing that Ben Platt is too old to be playing a teenager. So, you know, I didn't let that ruin the movie for me. And honestly, it is kind of nice to have a filmic preservation of his performance because he was so integral in creating the character. So, even though I have mixed feelings about the politics of him being cast in the role, the fact remains. He is in the movie, and he does a really beautiful job. His performance is great, it's captivating to watch, but then there are also elements about it that you just can't get away from. Because he looks... okay, there are some points in the movie where his age is just too evident to ignore. For the most part, it didn't take me out of the film. The only moment when it really did was the scene when Evan was starting to get closer to Zoe, and it played a little creepy, but aside from that, it was passable. But I think where his age affects the film, for better or for worse, is that he just has this inevitable maturity to him, and it really informed his performance as Evan. And I really read Evan as a character who was aware of everything that he was doing, and that painted him in a very specific light. Whereas, I don't know, I suspect that if you had a younger actor playing Evan, somebody like Andrew Barth Feldman, who personally would have been my choice for the movie, but I wasn't the casting director, but if you have somebody like an Andrew Barth Feldman, who seems like he is genuinely young and naive, then I think it's easier to forgive him for the choices that he's making, and it's easier to buy into what he is doing and his actions as just being, you know, the choices made by a teenager who really doesn't see past one step at a time. And just because Ben Platt came across as being somebody who was smarter than he was letting on, from my perspective, it just seemed like it was making Evan a bit more of a malicious character than I think the material intends for him to be. And I think that's something that's really interesting about Evan's character as written, is that that choice is there, like, for the performers who are playing Evan, as to whether or not he's consciously telling the lies for self-benefit and to help himself, or whether he is just doing what he genuinely believes is best in the moment and then dealing with the consequences as they get out of hand. So, who's to say? Okay, and finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I feel the movie succeeds as an adaptation of a stage show. And in some ways, I think Dear Evan Hansen has always wanted to be a movie. I think it lends itself to the filmic treatment perfectly because it's a relatively intimate show. On stage, as far as I know, it has a pretty small cast, and it's like it's a domestic drama. So having the intimacy factor that you get with film absolutely works in favor of the material. Now, I think I already said this, but I was pleasantly surprised at how effective this film was at just giving us a serious drama musical in a contemporary setting. Because I am very much of the opinion that musicals need to have some element of fantasy to them to justify the singing. Somehow, this movie justified the singing in a way that felt natural 9 times out of 10. The one time out of 10 that it really didn't work for me, and this is taboo, but I'm going to say it. The one time that it really didn't work for me was words fail. And clearly, you are not going to cut words fail. Words fail is like the emotional core of the story. That's what everything's been building to. That's when Evan has to reflect on all of his actions up until that point. That's when he has to face the music. That's when Ben Platt has to cry all over everybody. They weren't going to cut words fail. But I think the movie would have been stronger if they did. But on the flip side of that, you know, Ben Platt gave a beautiful performance that I'm glad I saw. So at the end of the day, I do think it's a very well-made film. I think it pays great tribute to the source material, and in a lot of ways, I think it improves the source material. But I'm very curious to hear what everyone thinks once the film actually does release in theaters. For the most part, I would say that if you like movies, and if you like musicals, and if you like Dear Evan Hansen, you will like the Dear Evan Hansen movie musical. Anyway, friends, whoop, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup 4-1. Now, let me know in the comments section down below, have you seen Dear Evan Hansen, either the film or the stage show, and just what are your thoughts on the story, on the material, on the music? You know, now that I know the show, I want to have these conversations with people, so let's have a conversation. And if you want to be the first to know when I release more film reviews, or just when I release videos about Disney, Shakespeare, cats, Funko Pops, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed already, it is so easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me again today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup 4-1. Go away.